we are PRA are a clinical research organisation based in Swansea. Our main headquarters for the UK is in Reading, but we do have quite a large and growing office in Swansea Marina down in SA1, where currently we have around 300 employees actually in that office. So a big vital part of our European operation is actually being run out of Swansea, which is really exciting because it's actually a global company. So to have a presence of a global company in Swansea obviously presents quite a few opportunities for graduates coming out of the university. So what we do as a clinical research organisation is actually run clinical trials. Obviously hugely relevant in today's climate and what's going on in the world. So we run clinical trials for all sorts of drugs and treatments that haven't obviously yet made it to market. So we have a whole array of different treatments and trials being run, you know, from your cancer oncology trials. We have some Botox trials, we have diabetes treatments being trialed. Actually, right up to modern day, we're running a couple of COVID trials as well. I know there are COVID vaccines out there, but as we know, well, these viruses can mutate, different variants can come into play, and so even now we have new variants of the vaccine being trialled by PRA. So it's a really exciting time for us, and as you can imagine, really busy as well, because it's key to get, especially with COVID, to get those vaccines approved and out to market as quickly as possible. So that's what we do as a business. So we run the clinical trials on behalf of the pharmaceutical companies that manufacture those treatments. So we own that process right from setting up in hospital sites, right the way through to recruiting patients in, administering the drug or the treatment to patients. We randomise the patients. Obviously, some patients will receive the actual drug, some will get a placebo. So we administer the treatments. We then gather a lot of data on the results of how those drugs and treatments are affecting our patients, monitor the data, and then submit reports, obviously, to all the regulatory authorities before that drug can be approved, and then finally go out to market if it passes the trial. So that's what PRA does. And as part of that process, there are numerous departments, obviously, that support that process. So you have the obvious clinical departments who actually run the trials themselves, look after the patients, administer the drugs. But then there are so many support functions that work in the background. So you obviously have safety, regulatory people, legal departments, finance, HR, IT, you know, there's a whole breadth of other departments behind the scenes to help run these clinical trials. So that's a bit of a flavour for what PRA do. And as I said, we're a global company. We have presence all over the world, big presence in the US and through IPA, and we're expanding our presence in Asia, actually predominantly in China and Japan, which is exciting, somewhere we haven't worked as a company as much in the past. So that's what we do as a company. So where my department come in, so I'm the operational finance director, and what we do as a team, we don't look at the kind of whole profit and loss account of the company. We're a commercial facing finance team. So what we're interested in is making sure that our studies are run profitably. So we work really closely and business partner with our project managers to make sure that when we are awarded a clinical trial by a pharmaceutical company, that we run that as efficiently as possible. So what we're looking at as a team is making sure that we budget and forecast the trials, so we know when activities are going to happen, so that we can forecast out the right resources to do that. We're responsible for invoicing and generating cash from our sponsors and the people we run the trials for. We make sure we're doing the trials as efficiently as possible, so with very few overruns, so that we're not spending too much cost as opposed to what we're getting paid for by the clients. And then we do the standard monthly reporting where we have to recognise revenue in line with accounting standards. So that takes us kind of 2 or 3 days at the end of each month to do our revenue recognition in our financial systems. What else do we do? We do cash flow forecasting, because obviously at any point in time we want to know how much cash we have on hand. We chase up any overdue invoices from our clients. Our clients tend to be big, huge kind of pharmaceutical companies that don't typically have any cash flow issues, but so it's more just, you know, making sure they're paying in line with their payment terms rather than having to send the bailiffs round to collect money, but it's just keeping on top of that cash flow. Then we do a lot of pricing. So clinical trials can change and evolve over time. So the trial that you think you're going to run at the start of a project will never look maybe as you think by the end. So for example, the sponsor might ask us to run a clinical trial for them just in Europe, and they want 100 patients to be enrolled in this study, and they want it to take around 5 years. That can change. It might be that suddenly we can't find the patients we need in Europe, so we have to expand into Asia, and suddenly it's not going to take 5 years, it's going to take 10 because we're in more countries and there's more regulation. So what our analysts do, as well as doing all the standard invoicing, budgeting, forecasting, recognising revenue, they're responsible for actually pricing any contract amendments, so that if the contract changes versus what we initially budgeted for, they have to work out how much the client should pay us for that, so that we're reimbursed for that change in the way the study is going to look. So it's very commercial, a really good opportunity as an accountant or a finance person to actually have a hands-on impact in what the business does. Very often finance is seen as a back office function that just kind of is very backward looking and looking at accounts from last year, but we are literally involved in what the business does day to day, and really involved in kind of maximising the profit that our company makes just through keeping on top of, as I said, those kind of contracts and making sure any work we do is priced up and brought into the contract. So it's a very wide-ranging role, and we're involved in lots of different elements of finance, which is, I think, why it's interesting. It's not a repetitive kind of data process role. It's very much a commercial-facing role for someone who wants to kind of get stuck in. So in terms of the placement, we have a kind of rolling placement student with us. So we've got a guy who's actually going back to university in June. And obviously we're looking to replace him for a year. And as part of the placement role, we treat the placement students just as we would treat a new graduate in terms of giving them exposure to the role. We don't hold back and just ask them to do admin things, because what we really want to do is show a person what it would be like to be a graduate in our team. So in terms of the work given to you, it would be just the same as if you were coming to us as a grad from university. Obviously we'd be, you know, we are more supportive in terms of coaching, training, etc., because we appreciate you haven't finished your degree. But what I'm trying to say is, you know, you would be given the same opportunity as the other grads in the team in terms of the work you're allocated. And you know, very often if someone does well in this role, we do look to bring them back after university. Hence another reason why we don't we expose them to the whole role, because it benefits us a year on if they come back and they've been able to do the role of a graduate. So yeah, so that's what we're looking for, someone to come in with a relevant degree. You know, we tend to look at people with accountancy, finance, business. We've had some math students, etc. So something relevant. For people who are looking to have a finance career, I guess, as a team, we support the CIMA or ACCA qualification for our grads. So if that was something you were wanting to do after university and train and qualify as an accountant, that is something we support as a team in terms of paying for the qualification and the exams and giving you time off for study. So this really is a great role for someone who wants to get that professional qualification long term. Okay, I'm going to take a break from talking at you now because I appreciate there may be some questions. So I'll let anyone throw some questions at me.
I have a few questions. So would a project be, would you be looking at the resource allocations of numerous different projects, or are you looking at sort of just like one or two throughout the year?
That's a really good question, actually. It does vary from analyst to analyst, depending on the size of the clinical trial. So, for example, we've got one huge trial with Roche, which is of huge magnitude. So that analyst only actually looks after 2 projects because that one Roche one is so huge. Whereas there are other analysts who have a lot of smaller projects, so they might have around 7 or 8 projects to run, but individually those 7 or 8 are a lot smaller and less complicated than our analyst who's just got the 2 bigger ones. So overall, everyone's workload is the same, but it's comprised of a different number of projects just depending on their size and complexity.
So what would the day-to-day sort of, I don't know, what would you do basically?
Yes, it varies. It can vary a lot week to week. We have typical tasks that need doing in certain weeks of the month. So the first week of the month, you'll always be doing the revenue recognition, which we call our kind of month-end reporting. So on the projects you have, you would be calculating how much revenue we should be booking in our accounts for those projects. And for any of you that do finance, that's based on a percentage complete basis, because we use long-term accounting revenue recognition. So that takes a couple of days. So you would just be recognising the revenue on your projects with the assistance of your manager. And then essentially that gets rolled up into our corporate accounts that go to our shareholders. So you really are involved in the numbers that get rolled out to the shareholders and the board. So that's the first week. The second week is usually around invoicing. So if you've got sort of 3 projects, we then need to invoice the clients for the work that we've done on that project the following month, the previous month. So it's all about invoicing in that second week. The third week, then we tend to look at forecasting. So we're forecasting out how that project is going to run for the rest of its life, essentially. And that's so we know how much cash we can expect to get in through the door, how much resource we should be allocating to those studies, depending on how much work they're going to be doing in each month. So that's week 3 is about the forward-looking element. And then the last week of the month is kind of an ad hoc week. We've done all the structured timetable stuff. And then it's all about, you might have to price up some new tasks on a study that aren't yet in the contract, or your project manager that you work with and the operational team might have some general finance questions or some reports they want run in, so you'd be doing that. So that's more the ad hoc week to catch up on everything else, essentially. So it's not a day-to-day it's not a day-to-day role in terms of you won't be doing the same thing every day. We have more of a monthly cycle.
Yeah, it's a bit nicer, isn't it?
Okay, great. So I think we had another question in the chat from Grace. So Grace is asking, is there just one placement role available, and is it just a finance role?
So in terms of the finance role, yes, there is just one role available for kind of starting this summer into next summer. So yeah, we just have the one role. In terms of other departments, I might have to defer to Raj actually, because I don't know what other departments are offering.
Yeah, so at the moment, the placement role would just be the one for project finance. We're in sort of contact with other departments at the moment. So we have another big department within Swansea for the project associates, which is a little bit different than in comparison to project finance, who they may look at sort of a placement students as well. But at this specific moment in time, it's just the one within project finance that we have live.
Thanks, Raj.
I've seen on your website that your company values are like agility and passion and resourcefulness. How do you expect to see that in an intern? Like, what do you look for in employees to represent those sort of values in your company?
I think in terms of the kind of agility and passion in our team, it's kind of we do expect people to be a bit self-motivated. So you'll obviously, when you join, you'll be given a mentor, which is great. So a mentor is usually a member of the team who's been there for around a year. So they've been here long enough to have good experience to help you, but not so long that they can't remember what it's like to be new. I think there's a good balance. We want people to remember what it's like to be new and have that kind of patience and empathy with a new starter. So you get your mentor, you'll get a manager. But we do kind of like people to be self-starters. So once you've had your training and you're given your projects, you will be contacted by the project manager of that team, for example, with questions, or you might be contacted with one of the kind of legal department with a few questions for you. And we like analysts to kind of, after their training, to just get off and have a go, and not to be and wait to be spoon-fed tasks from your manager. You are going to be contacted couple of weeks after you start the role by various team members. And we like people to have the confidence and kind of, you know, proactivity to just, if you don't know the answer, it's fine to ask, but to just not sit on things and not do anything about it. We like people to demonstrate that confidence and that kind of passion to just get stuck into the role, essentially.
Yeah, thank you.
That's okay.
I also was just wondering, like, you know, with the new climate and things like that, how have you adapted to these ways of working? I know that you said, like, with the mentors and then you have a manager. How does that relationship sort of changed with the new way of how everybody has to do things?
Of working, yeah. Do you know what? It's really difficult. And since we've been at home, I have employed, oh gosh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 people into the Swansea finance team since last June. And I didn't know how it was going to work, because the role's diverse. Like I said, we're not, if it was like a data entry role, fine, you've done it once, you've done it, you know, you can do it. This is such a varied role. I did wonder how it would work with people learning this role remotely, because we prided ourselves on being such a great team sat in the Swansea office that would help each other out. We had a new starter come in and everyone would rally around to help. I was really concerned about how that would work remotely. But actually it's worked really well. I think the good thing is about the team is they're all, excluding myself, young and have been used to having technology as a tool throughout university and throughout their previous grad jobs. And so to do a Zoom call, or we use Microsoft Teams with their mentees, is kind of second nature to them. And I think even though we're not in the office, all of the new starters have said they've spoken to their mentors every day, whether that's Microsoft Teams kind of video call or just a chat on Skype. But I just think the technology means people have been able to be connected, and actually we don't think it's made a difference to people's learning. We've had people join us in the second half of last year who were doing really well. We just it's a bit, I think you've just got to be more mindful of being in contact, especially from the manager's point of view. We can't just bump into each other in the tea room and have a chat with our grads and our analysts. We're making sure we put time in the calendars to ring our new starters once a week, check in and make sure everyone's okay. But yeah, it's working. Luckily with the technology, we've not had to, we've not seen a dip kind of in the way people are onboarded at all.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up from what Laura was saying in regards to the onboarding process. For myself, I joined August time, so I've only been here 7 months, so I haven't seen the inside of a PRA office yet, and I've been here sort of like sort of Laura was saying, 7 people, and I think maybe all 7, maybe 6 of them were for myself, who I've been working with Laura for a little while now, and the technology and everything like that, and the sort of all the managers have been super helpful in that regards for all the onboarding processes. I've had a few people come to me like, what's it going to be like? And I'm sort of definitely echoing what Laura said, that sort of time in the diary, that sort of technology has helped people sort of embed. And speaking from my personal experience, been here 7 months now, so the onboarding and all the helpfulness, not just from my own personal managers, but all managers and individuals throughout the business has been great. And like you sort of mentioned in your earlier question in regards to sort of what PRA stand for, is definitely that sort of culture they sort of cultivate, where you can just have a chat with somebody. Even though myself as a recruiter going to speak to sort of senior managers within the business, it's been sort of definitely very helpful, and it's great to sort of be part of PRA. So.
Oh, that's great to hear. Thank you.
Any other questions from anyone?
Yes, I did have a question. Is my mic working?
Yeah, we can
Yeah,
hear
no,
you.
that's brilliant. I was just in the middle of writing it down. You mentioned the opportunity of being recruited after a placement year. I was wondering what sort of progression roles you had sort of within the company. So you're brought on after your placement year. What sort of progression targets could you expect to sort of work for, say, within the next 5 to 10 years of being with the company?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, actually. So we employ people as analysts, and there are 3 levels of analyst in the team. So obviously analyst level 1 to 3. And we would expect someone to work their way up to analyst 3, I'd say over the course of 4 years. And during that time, you would not only develop in the role as an analyst and become better at what you do, but you would also study and hopefully within that 4-year period be qualified as an accountant. And we're ACCA. As a company, we're not really bothered which half and half in the team actually CIMA to ACCA. So that would be the kind of 4 years, I'd say, would be getting and learning the job towards a management role. City analysts or workers, as I've just mentioned, a team of 630 analysts. Whereas once you become an analyst level 3, you're a qualified accountant, you're good at the job, you then start to look to becoming a manager. And we have an assistant manager and then a manager role. And so we always look to promote within. In fact, we've just promoted one of our analyst level 3s to an assistant manager. And as a result, an assistant manager went up to full manager. And those are people who joined us as an analyst level 1 from university years ago. So we've kind of pulled them through the ranks. And then from manager level, there's a senior manager level, and then associate director, and then director. So we really do have, 7 or 8 tiers that you could work up through over an 8-year period. It doesn't stop after 1 or 2 years. We do have people now who are senior managers who joined us as an analyst 1 from university and have just been with us 9 years now and worked through the ranks. I joined as a manager 4 years ago and I'm now associate director, so I've gone up 3 levels. So we really are keen to promote from within. We would never hire externally if we had good people ready in the team for that next level, because we just think it's all about promoting the people you have, keeping good people. So we're always, always looking to promote internally where we can. And also we're a growing company and a growing team in Europe. So it's not just about replacing people who leave, we're growing as well, because, we've got more, even just with COVID, suddenly we've won 6 more trials than we had this time last year before COVID existed. Constantly there are new treatments coming to us for, like I said, cancer, oncology. There's a lot of diabetes trials at the moment that we're managing. So there's always growth in our industry. And so there's natural growth in our team, because if we've got more clinical trials, you need more finance people to support them. So we're seeing a lot of growth and development internally. So there is a really good career progression for someone who wants to have a finance career, certainly.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Thank you for answering that.
No problem.
Any other questions from anyone?
Hello, my question is going to be regarding ESG. As a global company, what would you say are your long-term goals to support sustainability?
Okay, so sustainability. So one thing that's changed actually in the last year, and probably not all out of our choice, is the way we run the trials. It's a lot more remote than we were doing a year ago. So in the past world, we would have a trial set up with a hospital site. Patients would visit that hospital site, and so would our clinicians to administer the treatment. We'd spend a whole lot on travel costs getting everyone to these hospital sites. We would send people to the hospital sites to collect data, monitor the data, and people were traveling all over the world to do the clinical trials. We've moved to a world of kind of what we're calling remote monitoring now, where all of that data can be input into an app by patients, and then that data extracted by our clinicians and monitored. It doesn't mean everyone has to travel to a hospital site, because we have the technology to do that remotely. And so our kind of carbon footprint in terms of everyone having to travel and meet to run our trials is kind of not what we do anymore. We were working towards that anyway. COVID just sped up the need for us to work in this way. And so we're utilizing so much more technology that means these things that we used to travel around the world for can now be done remotely. I'd say that's the biggest change that's happened in terms of kind of sustainability. Raj, do you have anything else that you'd like to add there?
Yes, sustainability wise, like you mentioned, COVID has accelerated the process quite significantly. So a bit of background about myself. So I do a lot of work in the finance sort of with Laura and all the other teams, but I also work with some of our biggest sponsors. So I work with Janssen, which is part of Johnson & Johnson. So you probably heard of them recently with doing the single shot COVID vaccine. And I do a lot of work with them in the digital health space. So that's one of the big ones that we've been using for sort of the acceleration of sort of remote participation within sort of clinical trials. So like you mentioned, like Laura mentioned, obviously all in app-based forms. We have loads of different technologies we use. So most of myself got a smartwatch where you can track all your heart rates. There's loads of different apps that we're sort of developing at this moment in time in what we call wearables. So that would be sort of heart rate monitors, little things like that to sort of accelerate the process of these sort of remote clinical trials. And for example, when we're doing different work with sort of clinical research associates, their amount of time on site now has mainly reduced. So traditionally a CRA would have maybe 10 days on site, roughly 8 to 10 days. Now that's reduced to 6 to 8 days, just because of the forward steps we're taking in regards sort of remote monitoring and digital health technologies that we're sort of putting forward as a company. And like Laura, the COVID accelerated, we were already working towards that, and our digital health team was growing specifically within Janssen. I think we had at the start of COVID, maybe 15 to 20 people within EMEA, specifically on digital health within Janssen. Over the last 6 months, when I've been working with them, we've moved that up to close to 40 at the moment. Just show you what sort of efforts we're putting in alongside Janssen. And that's just not that's not only sponsored. We're working with MSD, AstraZeneca, Pfizer, all a variety of different companies pushing that forward in regards to sustainability and digital health to sort of make it as remote as possible, which is where the way the world's sort of going at this moment in time, especially in regards to clinical trials.
Thank you for answering the question.
Great. Did anyone have any other questions?
Yeah, I have a follow-up on what you just said there, Laura. Because I'm very interested in emerging technology. I'm very passionate about that, and my degree is very analytical based, but also integrated into finance as well. So with the placement, would you say there's lots of opportunity to get in mixed with I'd say the technology and all the upcoming things that's being mixed in with the company, but also as you mentioned with the forecasting, with the models that you use and all that side of things, would you say there's kind of flexibility to get used to all the kind of analytical side as well?
Yeah, so we're heavily utilising a number of different systems in terms of our roles. So in terms of our IT systems, we have one that we use for our month-end revenue recognition. We have a totally different system that we use to model our future forecasts, for example. Then we have a kind of a Tableau dashboard, which is a pull of all of the data from all of our other systems that you can create your own bespoke reports and dashboards to analyze data from all our other systems to help you with a specific report that you want to generate. So in terms of the kind of the use of technology in our role, it's extremely, it is extremely high. We do use IT for most, for most of the reports we run, and have bespoke systems that help us develop custom reports, etc. In terms of the kind of external facing platforms, so the apps that our patients use, etc., that's kind of outsourced to third-party IT providers and other companies that PRA have kind of bought in. So we're not involved in that side of things, but there is an opportunity to kind of become, so what we have in our team is we have a subject matter expert for each of the systems we use in finance, and our analysts can volunteer to be the team subject matter expert for a particular area we work in. So if any of the analysts have a question on, say, our forecasting system, they go to the analyst who's the kind of official pro on that system. And so, that's something a placement student could get involved in. So say you have a bit of a passion for IT, and for the year you're with us, you'd like to be the subject matter expert for a particular area, and you get yourself clued up on it, then by all means, that's something we support. We like people to be, like I said earlier, proactive and do different departmental wide things outside the day-to-day role. So certainly some opportunities there with the specific systems that we're using.
Oh, that sounds brilliant. Thank you very much.
It's okay.
Great. So did anyone have any other questions?
Well, last question from me anyway. So obviously, with the COVID restrictions and all that now, are you looking to sort of getting back into the office anytime soon? Or yeah, sort of what time do you sort of think?
Yeah, so we in Swansea, it's a different rule for the Reading office because obviously Wales and England are just operating now as two separate entities, which is confusing. But we moved to phase 1 in the Swansea office yesterday. Now, what phase 1 means is that if you get specific approval from your manager, you can go into the office, and we've just got a threshold on how many people can go in so that they can be socially distanced, you know, like one desk in between each person sort of thing. So that's for now. And then what we're doing as a management team is just reviewing the Welsh Government guidelines, and if they get relaxed even more in, I guess, through April, we would move to phase 2 where we can have even more people in the office. So my hope, because I live alone and I'm really fed up, is that we would be back to kind of quite a large percentage of people in the office by the summer. So my hope is where the time we get a placement student in, we would have a nice chunk of the Swansea team, finance team, back in the office, so that, you know, we can mix and like knowledge share face to face. So that is the plan. I'm quite optimistic actually. I already have 2 of my guys approved to be in the office today, so that's 2 of 20. So we're getting there. So yeah, it's moving in the right direction, and I think by summer we should have a fair percentage of people back at work. Not at work, they are working. I hope they are back in the office.
Great, thank you. So I actually had a question just to kind of clarify for everyone, any students kind of who want to apply. Can you just clarify kind of the closing dates for the application, you know, what you require in terms of applying, and maybe a little bit about the recruitment process?
Yeah, sure. So I can start that one, and then Raj can pick up where I leave off. So this placement student, we would ideally like to join us around July time. We haven't got a specific start date because we know everyone's situation is different with exams and when university actually ends. So that is part of the discussion we'd have with the right candidate at the end of the interview process. But it would be around the July time because our current placement student is leaving at the end of July, so we wouldn't mind a bit of overlap for handovers and things. So kind of beginning to middle of July is sort of the time frame we're looking for. In terms of a deadline for CVs, etc., we'd hopefully be getting CVs in through over the next month, I'd say. Ideally, we'd want to be interviewing, you know, middle of April onwards. And the process, the initial process would be to submit your CV through to Raj, who does the initial screening. So the initial screening would be a telephone call with Raj, who would just speak to you about your intentions for the role, why you're applying, what makes you think you're a good candidate, and just some kind of, you know, the first round of typical interview questions. And then if you were successful through the first round, then you would come through to an interview with the finance team. So specifically 2 of the managers who work for me. They would have you do a presentation. It's nothing scary. It's a short 10-minute presentation about what you know about clinical trials and PRA, all of which is on our website, which is really handy. So you would do a 10-minute presentation to 2 of my managers, and then they would pick their kind of top 2 candidates from those, who would then come to me for interview, just as the final director interview. So that's the kind of overview of the process. I've probably missed loads of bits, so Raj, I don't know whether you want to fill in all the important bits I missed.
No, to be fair, you've got pretty much everything there. So, yeah, so the first sort of stage obviously would be with myself again. Nothing major. It's just an informal chat from my end, just to find out a bit more about you, your motivators, your drivers, little things like that, just to sort of obviously just have a conversation in that regards. Normal application process. So the role is live up on our website at the moment, so you can go via our website in that regards, or obviously I'll make sure my email address is available for you. So if you do want to have, obviously, to email it to myself directly, you're more than welcome to do that. Then obviously following the conversation, the process would be getting your CV to obviously Laura. Then obviously, like she mentioned, she had the two of the managers who work for her would interview you first. Again, the presentation, I'd be here. Any sort of questions, any bit of coaching or anything like that, I'd be, obviously, I know it's maybe one of your first sort of interviews you've done in this sort of situation. I've been at university, I know what it's like. It's not, it's a bit of a scary time when you're interviewing for the first time. So I'd be here to any help, any sort of guidance you need in that regard. So I'd hopefully coach you through that. Fingers crossed, if you're successful, you go to the final stage with Laura, which would be another sort of 30 minutes to an hour interview, just in that regards. Then obviously the process after that, obviously if you are successful, and obviously like Laura mentioned, June time would be the ideal start, so July time would be the ideal start date. In regards to closing date, PRA, we don't really put closing dates in applications. The sooner the better. Then obviously we'd hopefully have quite a few interviews for, fingers crossed, if you're all interested. At first stage, the managers may have their work cut out a little bit, interviewing a lot of different people, but fingers crossed, the sort of process will be as smooth as possible, or we try to make it as smooth as possible for all of you.
Great, that's really useful to know, and definitely a good insight, so thank you for that. Did any of the other students kind of have any other questions just before we finish? No.
What do you, sorry, what do you enjoy most about working there? Like, what is the best thing if you had to say one?
Oh goodness. So what I quite like about, and I'm speaking from my finance point of view, and this is my third job after university. So just quickly, my background, I qualified with KPMG in audit, and then came into industry. What I really love about this job is I get to use my accounting qualification, but it's a really commercial focused role. So I feel like I'm actually involved in what the business does, and I can help drive efficiencies and profit margins. Whereas in my previous two accountancy roles, it was a very backward looking, this is what happened last year, working in Excel on my own. Like, I didn't feel like I was having a hands-on impact on what the business does. But now I get to work with all these amazing clinical experts and safety and regulatory people who know what they do inside out so well. They're so passionate about it, and I'm able to kind of link in with them with my finance knowledge. Very often finance isn't seen as a very useful piece of a business, but because it's a commercial facing role, I actually feel like what we do impacts the business and help. So that's kind of how I feel like I'm able to make finance rewarding, because I'm doing finance for a company that does something so amazing by getting all these treatments and trials to market that essentially saves people's lives in the end for treatments that are approved and worked. So yeah, it's nice to find a job that makes finance relevant and value add, which isn't always the case, believe me.
Yeah, it's a tough question, actually. As I mentioned, I've been here about 7 months, and very similar to Laura. It's just knowing what you do affects people's lives is quite a big one. So my background, I worked for Baxter Healthcare. So they're another big sort of pharmaceutical medical device company. And it was one of the big sort of drivers I had when I was moving role into PRA, was just sort of the work they do. And I know it's so cliche, but I'm learning still every day. Obviously, I never knew what a CRA was. I'm learning all these sort of different types of terminology and technologies and things like that, and seeing the work they do and how it affects. Like, PRA was helping in regards to Johnson Janssen COVID vaccine, which is going out loads in America and Europe at the moment, and knowing you had some sort of small part to play in that, whether it be for myself recruiting the right candidates or whatever it may be. It's sort of a great driver, which is great for myself, and I personally sort of great. And working with so many different people, like I work with Laura, but I'll also be working with one of the managers in regards sort of the clinical trials, in regards their recruitment, and I'll also be working with somebody in the law team in regards finding a potential sort of a solicitor or somebody who works in the contracts team. So you get to work with so many different people with so many different backgrounds, which is great. And like this role Laura mentioned, you speak to so many different people. It's so commercially facing, and you're speaking to so many different people on a different basis about different things, and it only sort of broadens your horizons as well. If you're obviously in regards to the finance team, Laura probably won't like me saying this, but you can go into lots of other different roles within PRA in regards from project finance as well. Obviously, she probably doesn't want you to leave because you'll be great for her team. But in that regards, PRA, there's so many opportunities for you to learn and grow and progress your career, and which is one of the great things I'm sort of finding at the moment.
Yeah, thank you very much. It sounds really great and really rewarding. So thank you.
Great. So any final questions? No? Okay, great. I'll stop the recording.